Hi everyone from the south of Spain, from Seville. My name is Adrián Rodríguez Segura. I'm an architect and PhD student at High Technical School of Architecture at the Seville University, where also I'm a teaching staff. First of all, thank you to the organization for accept our communication and for organize this important event around our tangible and intangible heritage. The communication that I'm going to show you was carried out together with the Professor Loren-Méndez. It's a communication within the framework of the research of the UNESCO share in contemporary urban heritage, Build Urban Heritage Career, and the research group City Architecture and Contemporary Heritage of the Seville University as well. We are really happy to share with you our investigation, and we really hope that you enjoyed it. The communication that we offer you is entitled Heritage and Memory in the Design of the Emotional Well-being Seated in Migratory Processes. As you can guess, we are going to talk about landscape, but about this everyday landscape with which we usually live. We are going to talk about emotion, memory, and of course, heritage. And speaking of heritage, we begin with this fragment of the 2005 Vienna Memorandum that shows some of the new heritage challenges of the turn of the century. Specifically, its principle number 16 highlights that the emotional connection between human being and their environment, their sense of place, is essential to guarantee a quality of life in the urban environment to contribute not only to the economic success of the city, but also to its social and cultural vitality. From this fragment, we want to highlight the following concepts that refer to this new heritage concept that begin to resonate with the turn of the century, such as emotional connection, human being and their environment, urban environmental quality of living, social and cultural vitality. This is what this communication is about. This reflection on a new heritage assessment on our landscape, those non-exceptional landscape, everyday landscape of domesticity. Those places where we usually live and with which we find ourselves strongly emotional tied. It's a reserved niche to explore in the architectural file, despite they are already common in another file that also works with our urban landscape, such as human geography or environmental psychology, which we will see below. We want to start by simplifying this paradigm of the emotional assessment of our everyday landscape with a very recent Spanish project, Jardines en el Aire, Garden in the Air in English, by Luces de Barrio in 2020. A project that, moreover, very recently received the award of the new European Bauhaus in the category of renovated building with a circular spirit. The objective of the project was to explore the reserve of the Sevillian neighborhood Tres Barrios Amate to imagine new relationship of its people with their neighborhood based on their imaginary. A process that finally was materialized in three works. First, a perfume composed from the selection of the plant with the grid's representation in the neighborhood, and that was made by the renowned Parisian nose Bernabé Fillon. Second, a vertical garden that reuse the water from the air conditioning machines that are part of our architectural imagination of our neighborhood. Finally, a polyphony created from the multiplied voices, human and non-human, that take up the neighborhood. It's a project that is built from the memory of neighbors, from the imaginary of their daily landscape. So the people experience, as we can see, is a fundamental key in this process of recognition of our everyday landscape. It's the preamble that establishes the emotional connection between people and their more usual environment. And then it crystallizes in the individual and collective memory of the community, to finally become an intangible heritage value of the place. The exploration of this emotional facet in the patrimonial evaluation constitutes a new tool for the integral characterization of our landscape. This communication explored it specifically through the concept of attachment, a concept that, as we will see, has been extensively studied by the disciplines that are dedicated to study the emotional in our relationship with the environment. Now we will see a theoretical review with the advances in environmental psychology and human geography. Then we will see an analytical phase with two study cases. This communication is based on a solid support on emotional and heritage knowledge. We specifically want to highlight two work. This is the production architectural present by Jose Maria Galán from 2017, also directed by Loren, and the teaching research project for the 2019 competition for access to the faculty of professor of the University of Seville by Loren. We bring this slide from the geographer Manso Divine Right from 2018, in which they try to bring order to the vast file of the world around emotional knowledge of our landscape. The investigation around emotional knowledge of space and the affective relations between the subject-object has huge dense and divergent. We could dedicate a complete communication of this state of the Earth, yet we want to highlight several points along the way. Spinoza's philosophy of the 17th century, which breaks with the traditional supremacy of the reason to focus on affective knowledge, the cultural turn of the 60s, the endorsement of the neurosciences by claiming scientific knowledge of emotion and affection, and the recent affective turn of the last 2 decades where multiply five of research convert and claim emotional factor in the social configuration of space. We are going to focus on these two. Human geography and environmental psychology are the new direction that offer a very useful scientific perspective of the investigation of the emotional and architectural knowledge of living. In recent years, environmental psychology has led research on the emotional, although it has focused attention on the process by which places acquire meaning in people. We bring this image by the photographer Eamon Doyle in his series I, with which the author precisely tried to capture the identity of a city and its neighbors in Dublin. The study of the place itself remains the domain of the geographer. We try to exemplify it with the Porteria series by Bleda and Rosa, with which the author takes us to places that tell personal stories, experience from the past childhood. As a spectator, and despite the abandonment, in our head, the cry of the children, the paces and the goals still resonate. A derivative of them, the non-representational theory has taken the baton from the investigation and is the most current spearhead. Non-representational theory is focused on foresting spatial practice and experience. It aims to overcome the static and repetitive of the 21st century that the photographer Michael Wolff has captured so opportunely in his series Architectural Density. To focus on different movement and the corporeal, as Wolff also does in the same series that we have just shown, where to the macrovision it adds the most intimate dimension of the series. Where are we going? Everything indicates to a new state of practical applicability. Something that has been criticized for these studies is that their principles remain in the circle of the theoretical and their practical applicability has rarely been reflected. Precisely, the concept of place attachment has become one of the analytical tools of psychology and geography for this applicability. Specifically, it's very useful when applying them to case studies in which the inhabitants suffer change in the environment, so-called DIR, development, induced displacement, and resettlement. Attachment to them is essential to study the emotional factor between people and places in these migration processes. We are going to show you in this niche of practical applicability two case studies, two migration processes in which, on the one hand, the memory of the love of original nature stands as a construct of attachment to new places, with the case of migration in New Mexico and Colorado. On the other hand, like the new urban destination center that start out as a stranger, end up becoming in the long term determining factor in the construction of new emotional ties, as it happened in the civilian case of neighborhood of El Carmen. Study case 1, everyday landscape of rural memory. This first case study, conducted by the geographer Jeffrey Smith, has emotionally analyzed the migratory processes of Hispanic from the rural areas of north of New Mexico and the south of Colorado to the urban center of Albuquerque, Phoenix, Denver, Pueblo, Española, or Santa Fe since the 40s. Specifically, it studies how the attachment to rural places is manifested in the new places through various expressions of rural memory: painted mural, funeral preference, popular music, or even artistic recreation of dishes. Murals. Ethnic groups personify their landscape, emphasizing their shared identity. The creation of public murals is one of those forms of personification of the Hispanic population. Many rural Hispanic migrant communities have used this type of artistic representation as a window that connects with that longed-for landscape, like the mural of the image painted by Carlos Sandoval in San Luis, Colorado. It represents various everyday aspects of the life in the rural community. Funeral preferences. The studies by Smith and his colleagues show that cross-culturally, people aspire to rest in places with which they have a special emotional connection. Through various interviews with local funeral homes, Smith concluded that in Española, Santa Fe, and Pueblo, Colorado, a high percentage of deceased are sent to their homelands. Folk music. Music is one of the pure forms of the cultural expression. The public radio station CAN in Albuquerque and Santa Fe plays with enormous audiences songs that are representative of the music traditionally found in the town of the north of New Mexico. Ditches. The water supply interroute to the vital for the colonial Spanish, and the ditches became an indispensable tool of the agrarian life of the Spanish rural village. These ditches have also migrated from rural to urban with the displaced Spanish population. In the urban areas of Española and Santa Fe, local have commissioned work of art that remind them of the role of the ditches in their culture. Study case 2: Non-exceptional landscape of social neighborhood. The second study case focused on the period of rural exodus that happened throughout Europe during the second half of the 20th century, which led the proliferation of social neighborhoods in the urban peripheries under the standard of modern movement. This period in Europe, like the previous case, offered an opportunity to examine the emotional construction and deconstruction resulting from massive migratory movement. Opportunity offered by the neighborhood of El Carmen in Seville. There is a vast scientific analysis of social housing built in this period, assuming a substantial advance in a technical objective sense. However, they have barely explored their assessment from the emotional facet of the knowledge, something that has begun to worry the transdisciplinary study carried out by Andalusian Institute of Historical Heritage in the project Gravitat for El Carmen neighborhood. Specifically, the deep anthropological work threw out a unique possibility to dip into the emotional facet of knowledge in the study of social neighborhoods. The group of anthropologists carried out extensive field work and organized different workshops with the neighbors whose results were reflected in some of the lists that we show you. We're going to go through them quickly by extracting some of their strong concepts to build an imaginary of the identity value of the neighborhood. Family neighborhood, base neighborhood, generational renewal, wonderful people, a great neighborhood, proud to live in it. This is another list. We can extract my home, my neighborhood. Another one. The association Nuestra Señora del Carmen, Jarama Street Park, park between school, green areas. One another of the study. Theater, school. This slide shows a conceptual map of some of the most important identity values of the neighborhood. If we organize this concept of anthropological study and compare them to the 6 types of places to which people feel attached, according to recent research by geographer Jeff Smith in the book Exploration in Place Attachment, numerous implicit relationships can be found. These 6 places proposed by Smith are secure places, socializing places, transformative places, restorative places, validating places, and vanishing places. In short, and view of the result, we can conclude that, without a doubt, urban architectural factors have had a lot to do with the success and the intense emotional relationship built between neighbors and the neighborhood in El Carmen. I want to finish with this image of the recently deceased Juan Genovese, our particular tribute, as in his work, his crowd, his house, his communication has been centered on the human and on the social. Thank you very much.